Drafting an early round bust can leave your fantasy team dead in the water before the season even begins. But don't worry, I'm here to tell you who are going to be the early round running back busts that you should avoid and let some other sucker in your league draft. And let's start with number 5, and that's David Montgomery, who's currently being drafted number 32 overall. So we're talking about a mid to late third round pick. And sure, he had an unbelievable finish to the 2020 season. From week 12 on, he scored the 5th most fantasy points among any player, and he was the overall running back 1 over that stretch. So why am I concerned about David Montgomery heading into 2021 draft? Well, let's start with the obvious one, and that's his schedule. He had one of, if not the easiest schedule to finish the 2020 season. He played nothing but bottom 5 run defenses week after week. And of course, he did great and he played great against these defenses, but we know the schedule is unlikely to be that easy again in 2020, and that alone is going to be enough to knock him down. I think another thing a lot of fantasy drafters are overlooking is the impact that the injury to Tariq Cohen had on David Montgomery's fantasy value. Once Tariq Cohen went down with that week 3 injury, the Bears basically had no other running backs outside of David Montgomery, Ryan Nall, and Artavis Pierce. Essentially, David Montgomery got all of the work. If you look at the 3 games that Cohen played, David Montgomery had exactly 3 targets in each of those games and never had more than 16 carries. In the 11 games during the fantasy football season that he played without Cohen, David Montgomery averaged over 16 carries per game and only had 3 or fewer targets in 3 of those games. So he went from being a 2-down grinder to an every down running back who was actually heavily involved in the passing game. This is certainly going to change when Cohen comes back in 2021 healthy. So when you combine the fact that he's not going to have that easy stretch of defenses that he had in 2020, and he's going to lose touches again to Tariq Cohen in 2021, this seems way too high for David Montgomery, and he comes with way too much risk. Instead of drafting a landmine like David Montgomery, instead take one of the wide receivers that are being drafted around him like Allen Robinson, A.J. Brown, or Terry McLaurin, who we know are studs, who we've seen do it year after year and are much safer picks. Moving on to our next landmine with the number 28 overall pick, it's DAndre Swift of the Detroit Lions. So we're talking about an early 3rd rounder here. And again, way too steep for a guy with all the red flags I'm going to list. Now, there's a lot of hype around DAndre Swift right now because of the Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff blockbuster trade, which Pierre and I covered. You can check that out in another video right up here. Yeah, the hype is out of control, and people are thinking, well, now that Jared Goff is here, the Lions are just going to run the ball, and it's going to be all DAndre Swift. And while that might be true, it's not guaranteed to be true. And let's look at it. This offense is likely to be much, much worse than it was with Matthew Stafford. And it's very rare that a bad offense is a good situation for a fantasy running back. Bad offenses usually run fewer plays and score less touchdowns. I know, some deep knowledge for you right there. But it's true, and this is not a good situation for DAndre Swift. There is also no guarantee that Swift is going to be the guy in 2021. We have a new coaching staff. We have a new head coach with Dan Campbell. He is not their guy. The Lions could very well draft a running back that they feel is their guy, or go out and sign somebody in free agency who they feel fits their style better. There's no guarantee that it's going to be DAndre Swift. And even if you somehow want to ignore all that, even looking at his 2020 season, DAndre Swift never had more than 16 carries in a game, and he never saw more than 5 targets in a game. It wasn't like he was a workhorse even in 2020. With so many red flags, I think it's better just to pass on DAndre Swift in your fantasy drafts. Instead, you could take a wide receiver like Keenan Allen or Mike Evans, who are going around the same spot. Or if you're really set on taking a running back here, just draft Joe Mixon, who's going 1 spot ahead of him. Yeah, I get it. Joe Mixon didn't have the ceiling we wanted him to have last year, but at least with Joe Mixon, you know he's going to get the work and he's going to give you a nice, safe floor. Moving right along, we've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who is going a couple spots higher than DAndre Swift at pick number 26, so an early 3rd rounder as well. And I just don't get it. What did we see from Clyde Edwards-Helaire in 2020 to make you think he should be a high 3rd rounder or maybe even a low 2nd round draft pick? The Chiefs didn't seem to be fully invested in him, right? In week 6, they went out and signed Le'Veon Bell after he was cut by the New York Jets. Down the stretch, we saw Darrell Williams get run. We saw Le'Veon Bell get run. And in the AFC Championship game, when Clyde Edwards-Helaire was active, we saw Darrell Williams get the bulk of the run. There is nothing the Chiefs have done in 2020 that should make you feel like Clyde Edwards-Helaire will be the guy in 2021. Now, I get it. He's on the Chiefs. It's a great offense, but it's a great passing offense. They have Patrick Mahomes. They have Tyreek Hill. They have Travis Kelce. This is an offense that wants to and should pass the ball more than they run. So this isn't a workhorse situation for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So ignore the offense he is tied to. Instead, look at all the red flags, pass over him in drafts, and get a guy like Keenan Allen or Darren Waller who are going right around him instead. Now, these next two are going to be pretty polarizing. I get that, but I feel very strongly that these are guys you should avoid in your draft. And let's start with James Robinson, the undrafted free agent from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's being taken towards the end of second rounds in drafts, maybe even the middle of some second round drafts. And I just think that is crazy for a guy like Robinson. Now look, I like James Robinson. I was rooting for James Robinson. I was happy to see James Robinson do what he did in 2020. And if you grabbed James Robinson off of waiver wires or drafted him with one of your last picks, you were thrilled to have James Robinson, and he carried your team all the way to the championship. Now, I know he wasn't there when you needed him most in week 16, but hey, it happens. But as we enter 2021, I feel like he's going to be a trap. The Jaguars also have an entirely new coaching staff with new head coach Urban Meyer. They're going to go and draft Trevor Lawrence with the number 1 pick. They're going to have a new offensive philosophy. And again, like DAndre Swift, James Robinson is not their guy. I could very easily see the Jaguars drafting a running back who they feel is their guy and fits what they want to do in this offense. If this was after the NFL draft and the Jaguars came out of that draft without having done anything to significantly improve that running back room, then sure, this would be a great spot to draft James Robinson. But as of right now, I'm too worried that they are going to improve this running back room. And considering that receivers like Michael Thomas and Calvin Ridley are being drafted right before James Robinson, and players like Darren Waller and Keenan Allen are being drafted right after James Robinson, you don't need to take on the risk that he brings. You can just take one of those other guys instead, and your fantasy team will be just fine. And finally, we have Aaron Jones, who's being drafted with the 13th pick. So we're talking about right at that 1-2 turn. So he's either going to be your first or second pick in your fantasy drafts if you're picking in that 12 spot. And when you're picking somebody there, this is a premium pick. You have to get these picks right. You cannot draft a bust with these picks. And Aaron Jones, I feel, for that value, will be a bust. And here's a dirty little secret about Aaron Jones I'm going to tell you right now. He's the most overvalued running back in fantasy football, bar none. Everybody loves Aaron Jones. He's on a great offense. He's tied to a great quarterback. He's a good player. I get it. But this is a guy whose own team will sit him out for entire drives while Jamal Williams and or A.J. Dillon get run instead of him. And when they get down near the goal line, they are a pass-heavy team. They don't run the ball a lot near the goal line. They throw the ball with Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams and Robert Tonyan. So he doesn't even give you that massive touchdown upside. And there's the elephant in the room that he's a free agent and likely won't even be back with the Green Bay Packers as they have struggled to work out a deal. So where could he really go in 2021 to a team that needs a running back and would be an upgrade? Tampa Bay? I mean, it's a good spot, but is it better than Green Bay? Miami? Can that offense really support a fantasy football round 1 running back? Buffalo? They don't even run the ball. There's really not a situation I can think of where if he signed there, I would immediately slam dunk Aaron Jones as a first rounder. I don't even think he's a second rounder, to be honest with you. It's really unlikely that his situation gets any better than it was in 2021. And considering he's getting drafted ahead of guys like Jonathan Taylor, DK Metcalf, and Stephon Diggs, he should absolutely be a hard pass in your fantasy football drafts. Just take one of those guys instead. Well, there you have it. There are my 5 running back landmines I think you must avoid in fantasy football drafts in 2021. Let me know what you think. Drop a comment. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? If you enjoyed the video, you found it entertaining, you found it helpful, hit that thumbs up button. It really helps us out. And of course, if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification. You don't want to miss out on any of the content we're bringing you every single week to help you be prepared as you can be for your 2021 football draft so that you can win and dominate your league mates. Appreciate you guys watching. I hope it helped, and I'll see you next time.